Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Shane with Shane Media. Today we'll be discussing Ouija, Origin of Evil. Let's get into it. Ouija, Origin of Evil is a 2016 film directed by Mike Flanagan and stars Lulu Wilson, Elizabeth Reeser, and Annalise Basso. So, starting with the positives of this movie, the first thing I really noticed is the casting. Mike Flanagan has a few familiar faces here he uses in most of his movies and TV shows like Haunting of Hill House, and even though they are reappearing in his films, they all seem to know exactly what movie they're in and nail their parts pretty much every time. There's a lot of directors that do this type of filmmaking where they have the same reoccurring cast, Adam Sandler being one of the better examples of this, but Martin Scorsese's also, and maybe to a lesser degree, even Christopher Nolan. I could see where some might even call this lazy casting, but, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's like eating at a restaurant that you like a lot, but every time you go there, you get the exact same thing. Yeah, it's a bit redundant, but it's also familiar, and you enjoy it every time, so if you enjoy it, why change, Another thing that I enjoyed about this movie that Mike Flanagan is actually really good at is taking a familiar premise or template, but because of his use of lighting and imagery and ability to create tension and tell a story visually, he's still very effective in scaring the audience. Going into this movie, I'm like, okay, so there's only so many stories you can tell, so I'm okay with him using a familiar premise, and this movie's no exception. I've seen a lot of movies that are similar to this, but I was like, let's see what he does with this and what kind of value he brings this movie to make it stand on its own. And guys, because of the way he frames his shots and his music cues with his score and his timing on certain shots and the imagery, like I said earlier, this movie genuinely and legitimately gave me the heebie-jeebies. I was watching this last night, late at night, by myself, and yeah, it kind of spooked me out a little bit, and Lulu Wilson really knocked her role out of the park, and I remember seeing her in Annabelle Creations right around the same time this was made, and I thought she did really good in that too. This is actually a great young actor. I don't know a lot of what she's done. I'm sure I've seen her in other movies and just didn't know it, but she really, like I said, knocked her role out of the park. And it doesn't matter how good of a visual storyteller or director you are, if he's not working with an actor who's up to snuff. And between the two of them, they made an effective little film here. And I give kudos to any movie that can creep me out, because let's face it, guys, as horror fans, we don't really get scared of movies anymore because we've watched them so much and we've become pretty much desensitized to it. But we basically just watch them for the thrill of it, and if we just happen to get scared by one, it's a great bonus. But moving on, and I guess this is my final positive for this movie, would be, don't get me wrong, guys, I really like this movie. I know it seems like the positive section's kind of short, but the positives really outweigh the negatives in this film. Like, I really did enjoy it. But my final positive for this movie is that it's paced very well. It knows the movie it's in and doesn't overstay its welcome. It gets in and gets out. It doesn't spend too much time on exposition or giving you a bunch of answers to questions you weren't asking. It gives you just enough to set up the villain and allows you to understand what's going on while still finding the value in its simplicity. But very few movies are without flaw, and this movie is no exception. So, getting into my negatives here. A problem I have with a lot of movies in this particular subgenre, because none of them seem to know how to get this one thing right, is the look of the actual demonic entity itself when it's not taking over a host. Fortunately, there were very few shots with the actual entity itself, but unfortunately, the few times you do see it completely took me out of the movie. And I personally believe that it's mostly because of the use of CGI. There's a way to create a scary villain, guys. One that not only scares you because of how it's utilized, but even the look of it. And I believe that's using practical effects. If you look at every good example of where this was done effectively, they use practical effects. Two good examples are the original Exorcist, and in my opinion, even though I know this isn't a demon, Zelda from Pet Cemetery. That chick scared the bejesus out of me as a kid, and like I said, I know it's not an actual demonic entity, but it absolutely could have been, and it would have worked. But I feel like if they would have went the practical route, it would have worked out a lot better and been far more effective. Because like I said, it did take me out of the movie during those scenes, but they were used very sparingly. So, it's whatever. It didn't ruin the movie for me. However, when they were using Lulu Wilson as the host for this entity, it was absolutely bone-chilling in my opinion. And even though there was still some CGI used even with her, it was done sparingly, so it looked a lot more authentic. And I think anytime you use a kid as your main villain or antagonist in a movie, it automatically makes it a lot scarier anyways. So you combine that with her performance and you have a totally disturbing movie. Wow, guys, sorry. I'm all over the place today, but you get the picture. But guys, I'm going to go ahead and give this movie a 7.5. It's not a masterpiece, but it's a solid little movie that kept me entertained from start to finish. I believe this movie definitely outclasses its predecessor in just about every way possible. I may go back and review that one as well, but I don't know, might not. I really didn't care for it. But anyways, that's it for this video, guys. Please like and share this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.